Today, I'm installing this super expensive brand new rack and pinion because while driving down the street, the steering wheel moved the law and it felt really unstable on the road. And since the dealership quoted me at $2,000, I decided to save some money and do it myself. The first step was easy, lifting the car and putting jack stands underneath. But because the entire unit was coming out, the tires had to come off, as did the tie rod ends. After that, it was important to keep the steering wheel straight. So using the seatbelt trick, I locked it in place and began preparing to drop the unit by removing the bolt on the steering joint. Next, there was two pressure hose bolts that had to come off. But since one of them was hard to get to, we just disconnected it from the hose to pull it out. And once removing the two brackets holding the rack in place, I went up front and pulled the joint off the shaft. Then finally, about 20 minutes after, the steering rack came off and it was worse than I thought. Both left tie rod and right tie rod were completely destroyed. And unfortunately, since the steering rack didn't come with outer tie rods, I had to reuse the old ones. But the previous owner did tell me that he had just replaced them. So I put them on the new unit along with the rubber hose and rubber grommets. And it felt amazing. It looked new and vibrant compared to the old one that flapped around helpless like men with erectile dysfunction. So we put the new one in and everything went back on the same way it came out. Thankfully, it was the original steering rack on a California car, so nothing was stripped, seized, or rusted. But once it was properly installed and the car was lowered, the final step was to bleed the power steering. And for this, I filled the reservoir first and went inside to turn the key to accessories before turning the wheel full lock to the left, then full lock to the right 3 times. And since the steering rack was filling up, the reservoir had to be topped off, so I could go inside and do it again. But this time, the engine had to be on. And the reason for that was to not run the power steering on a dry steering rack. So once topping it off again, I tightened the wheels and closed the hood to go test it. And although it still needs an alignment, the car feels 1,000 times better and safer now with the new steering rack.